So, around kitchen tables, on main streets, and across local newsfeeds, people in the Snowy Monaro are asking the same question: where has our local voice gone? With council facing a massive deficit, confusion over who owns what, and trust in short supply, many are wondering whether the structure itself, this forced amalgamation, is the root of the problem. In other parts of New South Wales, communities have already stood up and said enough. The people of Cootamundra-Gundagai fought for years to reclaim their independence, and they've recently won. One of the pivotal voices in that victory was Grantley Ingram, president of Save Bombala and a founding member of the Demerge NSW Alliance, DNA, a statewide movement fighting to restore local democracy and accountability across regional New South Wales. He's been at the forefront of the push to give communities back their councils, their representation, and their say. Today, he joins us to talk about what that success means for towns like ours and whether a demerger could be the way forward for the Snowy Monaro. Grantley Ingram, welcome to the Monaro Zone.
Thank you very much, Chris.
So let's start off. What first motivated you to get involved in the demerger movement?
I was employed at the Bombala Council in the executive when the merger process was being considered by state government.
That means even prior to 2016?
Indeed. We went through all the hoops as required at the time, the Fit for the Future process, the T-Corp Treasury assessment. And I was also studying a master's program at the UTS, the Centre of Excellence for Local Government, under Graham Sansom, who was the lead author in one of the papers commissioned by the government of the day. So it's a pretty exciting time to be studying in that in that space. So that's where I guess became interested or engaged with mergers and local government structures more broadly. And the really disappointing thing, Chris, was that the research literature at the time and subsequently, driven by people like Professor from Armidale, Brian Dollery, and other luminaries, indicated that merging local government, consolidation of local government, just did not deliver the promised savings, efficiencies, economies of scale. So the research literature was pretty clear. The lived evidence from a number of other jurisdictions that had been down this path, Victoria notably, and Queensland also indicated it didn't work either. So there was plenty of evidence from a theoretical viewpoint and also a practical viewpoint that the government's position was fraught with danger. And I think now we can say fairly safely our lived experience here on the Monaro reflects exactly that.
And did you voice these concerns prior to the merger?
Absolutely, Chris. Yeah, so the local councils were active in exploring the idea. There was a number of community forums held right across the area. I attended most of those, and at every corner, at every event, there was a near universal rejection of the idea of merging. So the council prepared a business case, which I thought at the time was a responsible thing to do, to consider.
And that council was specifically Bombala?
No, the three councils jointly commissioned KPMG to prepare a business case on what a merger might look like. And as I said, that was a responsible thing to do, I think, in the circumstance. That KPMG report came back and said that the merged entity was unlikely to deliver on most of the key elements, which I guess was supported by my understanding of the research of the day, as I previously explained. So, so our council went forward, or the combined Kerma, Snowy, Bombala councils went forward with a proposal from KPMG. It came back and said, no, it's probably not likely to work. That was presented to government, but clearly the intention of the bad government, we think, wasn't about productivity or efficiency. It was about local government becoming a sphere of state government. And the non-party political processes that were in the regional and rural councils, I'm sure that the government of the day, the state government, thought we can sort of exercise some control over these regional councils if we get them big enough, which is what they've sought to do. It's failed miserably. But yeah, so that was the work done prior to the merger, and it was put to councils that they didn't have a choice, pretty much. Bombala Council considered, again, I think appropriately, that Bega Valley Shire may have been a better partner. And at one of the very last council meetings of Bombala Council, that proposal was put. Bega Valley Shire were accepting of the idea, and it came down to the mayor's vote. So that'll tell you the nature of the Bombala Council on the eve of this disaster in 2016. They were split, 7 councillors, 3 either side. 3 said we should go with Bega, 3 said Cooma, and the decision was left to the mayor of the day, Bob Stewart, which in hindsight I think was probably unfair in a sense, and we possibly should have went to a public meeting to further explore those opportunities. But clearly, that was in a climate where government had said, "You're not going to stay alone. You're going to have to merge with somebody." So, and in the end, the mayor cast the vote to go with Snowy Monaro.
I think those words were quite prescient in terms of, I think you may have said at one stage that to some degree that there's been a loss of local democracy since the merger as well.
Absolutely, Chris. Yeah. So the community sentiment at the time before the merger was that they didn't want it. They had no opportunity to express that in a democratic process, and it certainly was a railroad affair. And thankfully, subsequently, some restoration of those principles has been observed in Cootamundra-Gundagai, with the minister actually approving that demerger, and we know with the Snowy Valley's Tumbarumba going to a referendum vote, I think end of November. So there is some light, I think, in the restoring of democracy in those processes, which is very encouraging, I must say, because understand that the minister still retains the ultimate authority on whether councils can demerge or not.
Now, if we could play back history a little bit, do you think Bombala choosing to go with Cooma was a better or worse decision for the Bombala region? Do you think Bega would have been the better choice?
Oh, that's a very tricky question. I suspect Bega probably would have been a better choice. I think the future of our community is more aligned with the coast. That said, the economic performance and management of Bega Valley Shire Council hasn't been as bad as ours, which is not far off it. I think yes, probably that would be my thinking at the time. The other thought at the time was if we were to, and one of the trouble issues we have on the Monaro is that there's not really a sort of a central council entity that's large enough to carry the rest of the area. So the Queanbeyan-Palerang merger, you could argue, was a case where the large city of Queanbeyan could carry the outlying ones. Things happened at Wagga, the same, other centres. But here, there's never been a clear sort of a primary population centre. So we've got this really disparate, basis of our population, and of course, as a result of that, the aspirations of those communities can't be represented by a single entity, and that's the nature of the Monaro.
I think I recently spoke to Councillor Luke Williamson, and he echoed exactly what you're saying.
Yep. That
this region is so big, and there are so many disparate population groups. It's really hard to get fair representation for everybody.
Indeed. Yep.
From a selfish perspective, I am glad that Bob Stewart chose Cooma. Since October, since I've been meeting with him, he's been a great voice for Demerger, and he's taught me a lot about what Bombala was like prior to the Demerger. And considering that you were in council during that time, Is it true that Bombala was doing better financially then than it is now? In terms of Bombala back then, prior to the merger, had over $10 million saved in the bank. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes. So there was over $10 million cash at hand, debt free.
Can I just dwell on that point for a little bit more? Because we've increased the size significantly, and now we are in deficit. And so, what benefit has the merger been to Bombala?
It's difficult to see the advantages there with the rate increases, infrastructure in poor state. Certainly, the road network, which is the most important element. On the plus side, though, to be fair, the new water treatment plants at Bombala and Delegate, and the new sewage treatment plant at Bombala have been a positive. I would have to comment, though, Chris, Bombala Council had previously applied for funding for all those projects and had been knocked back several times by state government funding agency. So Bombala Council certainly, unfortunately, at the time had the money in reserve, as I just said, but we didn't have a partner in state government as far as those water and sewer improvement programs. So the mergers brought forward the improvement in those assets. It's difficult to see much outside of that, to be honest. And certainly the financial management and the financial position that we're in is quite concerning to me.
Bob had also told me a story that at one point the Snowy River Way was to be paved, and that apparently that quotes that had been put out to tender to outside parties had come in much more expensive than what could have been done locally. And so Bob said that the community came together and did it themselves.
Indeed, yes. And $7 million for 28 kilometres of soil road construction.
That's incredible. $7 million for 28 kilometres.
Yep.
Whereas today, I believe we're averaging closer to more than $1 million per kilometre.
Right. Yep. Wouldn't surprise me. So, and Bombala Council had a pretty solid skill set in civil construction works, having been the construction authority for the Monaro Highway south of Bombala. So the skill set was in house, and that enabled the council to deliver that project on time and on budget. So certainly there was capacity there, and we've lost some of that, I think, Chris, with the with the staffing restructures. And if I might add in now, talking about staffing and skill capacity, the current demergers of Gundagai, Cootamundra, and the proposed vote on Tumbarumba coming up really is unsettling. I fear the opportunity to attract competent staff, especially at senior levels, and we need a good strong executive in our council, as does any organisation. And I think this demerger issue, the minister has blown it wide open as of the announcement of the Gundagai demerger. Prior to that, and I'd certainly said to plenty of people in the Demerge Alliance group, because the minister still retains the authority to approve or not approve demergers, I said, keep your powder dry. Let's see what happens at Gundagai, and subsequently Gundagai is out. Snowy Valley's look like a pretty good chance. So all of a sudden, things have been blown right open, and really to try and attract quality staff to this community, and the staff that want to invest in the community and be part of the place, you'd think pretty hard, I reckon, under the current uncertainty around demergers. And I think for no other reason than that, council should be serious about answering that question. And it's not what the councillors think, and it's not what Grantley thinks or you. It's what the broader community think. I think we can't lose sight of that.
And from my talks with Bob as well, it appeared that back in the day, 2016 seems so long ago, that customer service seemed to be more local centric as well. That if you had an issue, you could just go into the offices, talk to somebody, get things resolved quickly. Whereas now, I think one of the big complaints is that you just can't get a hold of anybody in Cooma to solve your local issues.
Yes, well, I can't speak too much of the current circumstance, but certainly the structure of the small council, as Bombala was, meant that staff were not on target. The mayor would know about it down at the pub on a Friday night having a beer. So those feedback mechanisms were very well established. And that puts the staff in a position where when somebody comes in with an issue, there's an incentive to deal with it. You couldn't stonewall it away from council because, as I said, the mayor would find out down the pub, or the deputy mayor, or any other councils. So the staff were sort of, the staff that were there were certainly invested in the community. That's one comment I'd make. But secondly, the feedback loop was pretty tight. So if something came before the staff members, it will be dealt with. And I think at Bombala Council we had a fairly strong policy position where the staff were directed by policy, which was obviously adopted by the council. So councils will normally only see issues, apart from the mundane governance stuff, when something come before a staff member that the policy didn't quite capture. And that's the way to run a business. You can't have 1,500-page business papers. Right? Develop the policies. Let the staff deal with the issues in accordance with council's policy. If the policy doesn't cover it, or there's a particular nuance, then it goes to council. So it'd be hell being a councillor in our current council.
I think you've hit a lot of the problems that we're seeing across the region on the head, which is, there is just no accountability now. Now that the bureaucracy is spread over such a large region, and the people that are dealing with issues aren't in the same region, there's just not that accountability as you would have in a local area.
Correct.
I suppose some of your opponents have used the phrase, "You can't unscramble an egg." Now, how would you reply to that?
Well, that's an excellent question, Chris. I wonder how the people at Cootamundra-Gundagai are unscrambling the egg. The Minister of Local Government, indeed, in this state has said, yes, you can unscramble the egg. Importantly, the egg over there is, there's about 3,600 people in Gundagai. It's a very, very small council. So I think, that's just a bit of a nonsense line. The important thing about the Cootamundra-Gundagai issue is that the ministers have said not only can you unscramble the egg, but you have to do it yourself. So the councillors remain in place. And there was some concern over there pre this announcement that they'd sack the council and put an administrator in, which leads to a disaster quite often. So really, the minister's shown great faith in allowing the council to manage the process, and he said you've got 12 months to do it. So, and they're not messing about. So I think you can unscramble the egg if you leave it to the community to do so. Yeah. So that's and clearly, and the minister has now said to Chairman Tumbarumba, you guys have a vote on it, and I'm sure if they vote out, they'll get out. So we shouldn't be, I don't think, held back by those, those sort of throwaway lines. But to reiterate, it's what the community want, Chris. I've got a view, you've got a view, the council has got a view. Ask the community, and a poll question at a general election is a very inexpensive way to do that.
To kind of paraphrase one of my heroes, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he kind of said that if you're heading in the wrong direction on a train, the best thing to do is stop and actually get off. And I think if we look at the current state of the finances in our region, I think these efficiencies that were promised just aren't actualizing.
Yep.
And the rates, I believe, have gone up 10% every year for the last 3-4 years.
Yep.
They're even discussing future special rate variations. And I think it's time to hop off this train and get back on the course.
Yep.
What would be some of the misconceptions about demergers that you've come across?
The cost. That's something that's sort of bandied around. We're fortunate, and indeed, we are fortunate on a number of fronts, Chris. One is that the review of the Local Government Act May last year made very clear that the government must pay $5 million towards the cost. So that's not optional. That's a must pay. We think that Gundagai, Cootamundra, is probably going to come in at under $3 million because they're managing the process. If you can give this to bureaucracy, they can make it cost whatever you like. But so we'll have certainly a very good example of the actual cost of demerging, because it hasn't occurred, I don't think, not under this Local Government Act. Prior to the 93 Act, there was a demerger up in Sydney. But so cost is a big issue. People are very concerned about plant and equipment, and they're very concerned about cash. Certainly the people of Bombala are, because they saw their $10 million, which was pretty hard earned, I'd have to say. Bombala Council, obviously with a $10 million cash reserve, with a population of about $2,500, there wouldn't be a cash reserve position like that per capita anywhere in the state, I wouldn't think. So potentially Bombala may have held too much cash. But better too much than not enough.
I think that shows how much love that people had for their community, that they entrusted so much per capita too.
Indeed. Yep. But the question is, why do council raise revenue to spend it on that? That's an age-old thing, on services and the like. But you're better off having cash at bank than not. We're seeing the restrictions now we have when we don't have that surplus of opportunity. So that's the cash issue is certainly a demerger issue. Will we get our money back is the question they pose. And what about the plant? Bombala had a reasonably good plant fleet, because we've been constructing roads and doing works of that civil construction nature. And so where's all that gone? There's lots of rumours about graders being sold for cheap and that sort of stuff. So but they're the sort of issues that none of those are, in my opinion, insurmountable. But obviously the anti-demerger group are fostering those sorts of concerns, trying to spook the community, I fear. Yeah.
Now, Councillor Williamson and yourself have spoken about how vast and diverse the region is. I suppose to somebody in town that hasn't been to Bombala or hasn't been down to Delegate or to different regions of this greater Monaro region,
yep.
How are they different? Like, how is Bombala different from, let's say, Coomera? How is Bombala different from the Jindabyne region?
Yes. Well, Bombala's been geographically separate because of the mountain ranges and the Snowy River and that sort of stuff. So that brings, like it or not, a different approach. We're certainly based on timber industry and agriculture, and not tourism. The differences between Bombala and Jindabyne couldn't be greater, really. They've got very poor, reasonably poor country up there. The agriculture's pretty low. Forestry is almost non-existent. We've got this seasonal tourism, in sector. So, and Coomera is, I'm not sure what Coomera is. It's a
industrial.
It's a service centre, and not the northern part closely aligned with the ACT. That's there's some agriculture there, not a lot of forestry, but maybe more services related. But the other question is about, I guess, ethics and equity. Is it appropriate that the Councillor Bob Stewart decide on the future of the Adamidity swimming pool, for example? Because how do you reconcile that? Am I concerned about the Jindabyne, equestrian centre? Well, not really, nor I should. It's not my business. So that's the issue we've got as far as those differences go. They're real, and there's not a mechanism within a single funded entity, which is the council. And this is an issue that came up very clearly in the Cootamundra-Gundagai demerger process, and it was put something like, they used to be sort of reasonably good neighbours when they're separate councils. But when they merged, they were fighting for the one bucket of money, and then they become adversarial, and that's what happens. So why can the Cootamundra Golf Club get a bit of grant and the one at the Gundagai can't? So you set up those divisions up when you try and mesh these things together that don't fit.
I think that's a great example that you gave. Like at one of the recent council meetings, not Bob Stewart, Nick Elliott and Ruben Rose were pleading with the gang to provide $5,000 to get the toilets in Jindabyne fixed before the winter.
Right.
And if you think about $5,000, is it really that much that we have to beg for $5,000?
Mm.
When Coomera would probably spend that much on a library day.
Wow. Yep. Yes. Excellent
And so,
point.
no, I can certainly see where the trust and accountability will come into that. I believe that there's a motion coming up this Thursday being put forward by Bob Stewart regarding a demerger, a poll for a demerger. Could you talk about that?
Certainly, Chris. Yeah, so the opportunity presents to, in my opinion, very economically assess the views of the broader community by way of a poll. Now, that's a separate question. It's a separate ballot paper that you would receive when you were going to a council election. So you'd receive, if the proposal gets up on Thursday, you would receive obviously the ballot paper that would have the councillors' candidates on it, but also another ballot paper which would have a question on it relating to demerging. That poll question has to be a yes/no answer. So the current question proposed is should the council investigate demerging? That's the one in the business paper, as I understand it. Pardon me. So that presents as a cost-effective. About $40,000 would be the cost of that. And I would argue the council need to do some sort of community engagement, be it a poll at the election, I think is an opportunity, or some other, to really assess, is there an appetite for demerging in the broader community before we launch into a full-scale business paper on the demerger processes and the business cases and all that analysis, which obviously costs some money. The question is, is there appetite in the community? I think there is. Other people have a different view, but again, a poll held concurrently with an election is a very effective way, as a first step, I think, to say, yep, is this thing worth looking at or not? So that's the motion there from Councillor Bob Stewart. We potentially may be going to the polls in the by-election sooner rather than later. Who knows? But I think the timing's appropriate, given that the minister has shown his hand with Gundagai Cootamundra. I keep coming back to that. The minister is clearly open to communities coming to him, saying, "We seek a demerger. Will you assist us in that?" And he's shown his hand and said, yes, he will. And I think, and we're a bit off course here, Chris, but I think the minister, from a political viewpoint, has played a pretty good card here. So his response in the next state election campaign to the disastrous affairs of most of the merged councils, I mean, look at the Central Coast Council, Chris, the worst result in the history of local government management finance, the worst result. And the merger that was showcased by the government of the day to be it was the golden child. It was going to be the one in administration for several terms. Absolute disaster. What the minister has done with this process now, showing his hand at Gundagai, is that any community that come forward to him in the election campaign and say, what are you going to do about these disastrous merged councils? The minister will say, well, I've shown my faith in listening to the community. If the community is so concerned about their council, come to me for a demerger. So he's really opened that pathway up, and I think, and we'll be able to deflect a lot of criticism of the council mismanagement back through state government and say, yep, you want to demerge? If your council's not working, come and talk to me. So I think the signs to me look fairly promising from government. Yeah, and I guess also, a lot of these merged councils are inching forward towards, economic disaster, and the minister doesn't want that, clearly. So, I think it's a strategic move by Minister Hoenig, but and one I'd hope our council might, take a lead from.
In our own local council, though, what are the chances of this motion succeeding, in your view?
Well, I think it'll probably be tight. We appeal to the motion appeals to democratic principles, given the community a say. There'll be 100 different problems with it. I'm sure the anti not demerger groups, the councils that would like to see the status quo remain will come up with all manner of issues, I'm sure. But it really comes down to whether they represent the community or just themselves and their own aspirations, I think. And it'll be a bit of a test in that regard, Chris. Because it is a poll. The council will get a result. It will say, there's a percentage voted yes, a percentage voted no. That's all it is, right? That will inform the council then as to where to go with this process.
Putting yourself ahead of time, let's say to the Thursday meeting, what do you think will be the strongest argument put forward against taking a poll?
Probably the potential cost of a business case, or the lack of information provided to the community prior to the poll about the pros and cons of a demerger. I think they'd be the things that will come forward. And my response to the cost of this exercise is only 40,000. 40,000. That's not an insignificant amount of money in the scheme of our council's expenditure. It's not much, but certainly got to be considered. But I keep coming back to this. If we don't settle this thing once and for all, we're going to be hamstrung by a council that can't get good staff, will struggle to retain them, and that's not going to do all well for us. Whether we stay merged or not, Chris, this thing's got to be dealt with, And the minister has said 6 times he's shown his hand. He will listen to this. So if the community want it, it will come. The other thing that the legislation review did was to make clear that we only need a petition of 10% of the electors of the former council areas. So Save Bombala's, but we've got a 1,500 signature petition, which we haven't chosen to exercise yet. We're actually waiting for the minister's view, and now we've got that. The risk is if the council don't take the lead on this, we could have a whole raft of community groups and others coming forward with demerger proposals. And that'll be a mess, I'd have to say. So, but council, I think, need to recognise that and seek to manage this rather than just let it go feral.
I suppose that's why I've been a big supporter of the independents, because I think they are showing the way forward on how to demerge on a lot of these issues. Bob's been very vocal about this. Ruben's been vocal on this. Same with Luke and Andrew. What would a demerger model look like to you? Would it be just going back to the 3 shires that existed before, Snowy River Shire, Bombala Shire, Cooma, or would it be something different?
Well, in the first instance, I think we would seek to re-establish the 3 as they were pre-merger. That would be the first item of business in my mind. The next item of business would be to constructively engage with those border communities, if you want to call them that, right? And say, Liberty Bell's case in point, Dalgety potentially, where do you see your future? Potentially even some of those areas to the east of Cooma, where do you see your community of interest, Chris? That's what really should form this conversation, I think. But you can't do that in the midst of a demerger campaign where there might be all manner of different things thrown up. So, you could spend the rest of your life deciding if you wanted to make 2 entities out of the current one. I think for efficiency of process, re-establish the 3. They're known entities. Business cases existed. We have the KPMG business case, as I mentioned earlier. We could use that as a basis for that. But then I think look very hard at community of interest. Can we change that? But also the opportunity presents to engage with government about the funding of what was put out in the merger processes back in the day. A rural council model, and that was recognised by government. I think they thought the merger process would solve all those issues of rural councils. Clearly, that's been proven wrong. So I think there's a chance now to say, well, listen, that didn't work. If we reform these councils, and I know the people at Gundagai that I've been speaking to have made that clear to the minister, they've got their democracy back, but they need to be able to manage their affairs free of encumbrance from state government bureaucracy, but also need to be reasonably funded from government. So that's, I'd say, an exciting opportunity to, look at that rural council model, revive it, if you will, and places like Gundagai going away, splitting, Tumbarumba potentially, they're all very similar to us, Chris. So I think there's a chance, because the state government can see the trajectory of the finances of the merged councils. They know what's coming if they don't do something about it. I mean, the improvement order that we've got on our council, that is not the solution, the long-term solution, right? And I've yet to see any indication from our council that we're actually turning the corner.
Our council seems to mirror Tumut and Tumbarumba quite a bit in this regard. How far along the line are Tumut and Tumbarumba in their de-amalgamation process?
Well, they have their referendum vote coming up at the end of November. So that's been approved by the minister, and that will be held. As I understand it, the results from that are then consolidated and sent back to the minister for his consideration. So they've spent some money on business cases and informing the community. So I think they've done a fairly good job there. So that's where they're at, and that to me speaks of a good, solid democratic process. To be fair,
it also gives confidence, I suppose, that we're not leading the way in this. That this is something that's already been done in other regions.
Correct,
and hopefully it's our turn soon.
Well, indeed, and the Gundagai Cootamundra demerger process should show the way. I think for other communities to say, well, this is not going to be a train wreck. We can actually split these things up and survive. And there are chances there, real opportunities, I think, to retain centralisation of the back office services, Chris. All the stuff that we were trying to do before merger, in having a centralised payroll, centralised creditors, debtors, rates, etc. We've got to retain those wins, hard fought as they've been, right? There's no reason why you need a payroll system, in a Bombala Council. That's just silly stuff. So we can really make some progress. I think if we do demerge, we need to look very hard at retaining those services rather than re-establishing everything that we had before. And to that end, our three councils, Snowy, Cootamundra and Bombala, were reasonably proactive in that pursuit prior to the forced merger. So I think we can make some real wins here.
Hoping and hopefully this comes to pass that you do succeed in the motion this Thursday. What would be the three next steps after that? Suppose a poll is agreed upon.
Okay.
What would be the next steps after that?
Well, I think it's beholden on the community to inform themselves and council should lead this debate as to what does a demerger look like, what are the costs associated with it, what are the opportunities, etc. That sort of analysis. Certainly, if we get a yes on Thursday to hold the poll, Save Bombala and probably the Demerge Alliance will become more active and try and engage with the community more fully on the matter, and it's certainly something that needs to be considered by the community, and they need to be informed. But really, I mean, this is the first pass I'm seeing, Chris. Do you really want to look at this thing, you blokes, or not? Yes or no? And if they say yes after the polling date, then the council need to be instructed to move forward with it. Yeah.
And I suppose finally, what would be your message to residents who feel skeptical, tired, or powerless after nearly a decade under this amalgamation, or as some would call tyranny?
Sure. Look, I would say to them, look to Minister Hoenig's response to Gundagai Cootamundra. The minister could have gone to Gundagai and said, as you may be aware, the previous Wendy Tuckman, the previous Liberal Party coalition minister, had approved the demerger. He could have went to Gundagai and said it was approved previously, I'm duty bound as the minister to accept that, and left it at that. But he didn't. He went there and went on for half an hour about how bad merged councils were, how destructive they were community. And then, of course, he approved the vote at Tumut-Tumbarumba. So up until that point, Chris, the demerger road had looked impossible, right? And to their credit, the Greens pushed with the support of the Demerge Alliance group. The Greens introduced into Parliament a bill to amend the Local Government Act last year, and the government responded to that bill by putting their own bill forward. So what I'm trying to say here quickly is that in May last year, the legislation changed to allow the pathway for demergers. Only a number of months after that, in government time, 12 months later, the minister saying, "Oh, you blokes are Gundagai, you're out." So that's what happened very quickly. So we've now got, I think, whereas with the previous, 10 years back to 2000 or 8 years back to 2016, demergers just weren't getting any oxygen at all. So that's what I'd say to people. This is a new game, and really, as I say, the Greens pushed that motion forward with their bill, and the government were forced to respond, which is part of the strategy. So it's happened pretty quickly once it's happened, Chris.
Is there any question that you think I've missed that I should be asking? Or any comment you'd like to make before?
No, not really. Only just a general comment for those that might be interested in research. The Queensland mergers were very well implemented, and the government of the day in Queensland put a lot of thought into it, and it wasn't the mess that it was in New South Wales. Interestingly, and as a result of that, the first 5 years of those merged councils saw significant savings. Right, so it looked like the economies of scale argument, the bigger is better, was working in Queensland. Professor Joseph Drew, who works for the Centre of Local Government in, I think, Newcastle Uni now, but certainly was at UTS in Sydney, has done a lot of research on that. And interestingly, after the first 5 years, even in Queensland, with a very well orchestrated merger process, the savings started to slip away. And within 8 years from the merger point, they were line ball. So that's a comment I make. And similarly, work that Brian Dollery from UNE did on the Clarence Valley councils, where there were 5 councils merged there back in 2003. I think some 14 years later, and this is academic, rigorous academic research. It's not some sort of scurrilous bit of, I think there were 5 indicators they assessed there for the health of the new council. They were demonstrably worse off as a result of that merger, even 14 or 15 years later. So, the academic research is in. It doesn't work, and why should we suffer from a very poor decision by government? In fact, the Institute of Public Affairs has rated it as the worst policy position, I think, of that year. Anyway, that's the only comment I'd make.
Well, thank you very much, Grantley. And where can people get in touch with you or find out more about DNA or Save Bombala?
Well, you can shoot me an email if you like at savebombala@gmail.com. Yep, that's the best way to communicate.
And do you have a Facebook page as well?
There is a Facebook page. It's not very active, but email's the preferred method of contact. Savebombala at gmail.com.
Grantley Ingram, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
No worries, Chris. Thanks for the opportunity.
Much appreciated.
Champion.
There was a time when the rails ran strong through Bombala's heart, where they belong. Iron and timber, sweat and pride, built by hands that never shied. Now the weeds creep through the ties, and council speaks in hollow lies. They say it's gone, they say move on, but some things ain't meant to be withdrawn. The rails still whisper when the cold wind blows, echoes of engine stories untold. You can pull up the tracks, try to make them fade, but you can't erase the journeys made. Alan walks where the trains once rolled, hands worn rough, but his grip still holds. Fate keeps watch by the station door, sweeping dust like she's done before. They work these yards with love and care, kept the rails from rust and despair. They don't ask for much, they just want to see a town that remembers its own history. The rails still whisper when the cold wind blows, echoes of engine stories untold. You can pull up the tracks, try to make them fade, but you can't erase the journeys made. One town, one line, 1,000 dreams. They don't see what the railway means. If they tear it down, if they take it away, what will be left to mark yesterday? The rails still whisper when the cold wind blows, echoes of engine stories untold. You can break the steel, turn it into dust, but the heart of this town won't give up on us.